Let me tell you something that the university admissions office will never put in their brochure. I dropped out of Wharton, one of the most prestigious business schools in the world. I sat in those classrooms, I listened to the lectures, I read the textbooks, and I left. Not because I was failing, but because I realized something that most people spend their entire lives never figuring out. The school was not teaching me how to build wealth. It was teaching me how to work for the people who build wealth. There is a difference, and that difference is everything. Now, before you misunderstand me, let me be very precise about what I am saying. I am not telling you education is worthless. Education is one of the most powerful forces on the planet, but there are two kinds of education. There is the education you pay for with money, and there is the education you pay for with attention and time. One of them gives you a credential, a piece of paper, a signal to the market that says, I can follow instructions. The other one gives you a capability, a set of tools that allow you to generate wealth, whether or not anyone gives you permission to do so. In 93 years on this planet, I have met thousands of people, brilliant people, people with degrees from Harvard, from Oxford, from MIT, and I have watched many of them struggle, genuinely struggle, not because they were not smart, but because the skills they spent 4 years and $200,000 acquiring were the wrong skills. They were skills designed to make them useful to someone else's machine, not skills designed to allow them to build their own. Today, I want to talk about a different list, not the list of subjects your university required you to study, not the list of certifications your industry told you to collect. I want to talk about 7 specific skills, 7 capabilities that the wealthiest people in history have quietly built while everyone else was collecting diplomas. These are not skills you learn in the classroom. They are not skills that come with a grade or a certificate, but in the real economy, in the marketplace that actually determines who gets rich and who stays poor, these 7 skills are worth more than any degree you can buy. A 4-year university degree costs, on average, between $100,000 and $300,000 when you factor in tuition, housing, lost income, and the interest on the loans you take to pay for it all. In return, it gives you a baseline salary increase that economists estimate at roughly 15 to 20% above a non-degree holder. That sounds good until you realize that baseline is being eroded every year by automation, by globalization, and by a labor market that has more credentialed people than it has premium jobs to fill them. The skills I am going to describe today do not have a fixed ceiling. They compound. The more you use them, the more valuable they become. The more valuable they become, the more they earn. And unlike a degree, which begins depreciating the moment you walk out of the graduation ceremony, these skills appreciate over time. They get sharper with use. They get more valuable with experience. They are, in every economic sense, assets. But first, we need to understand why the system never taught you this, because it is not an accident. It is by design. Let us talk about what a university is actually built to do. In the 1800s, the industrial economy needed workers. Specifically, it needed workers who could show up on time, follow a standardized process, accept authority without question, and perform the same task reliably for 40 years. The Prussian education model, which became the template for virtually every school system in the Western world, was designed explicitly to produce this kind of worker. It was not designed to produce entrepreneurs. It was not designed to produce investors. It was not designed to produce independent thinkers who might one day look at the system itself and decide to build something better. It was designed to produce useful parts for a machine that someone else owned. And for most of the 20th century, that was a reasonable bargain. You went to school, you got a credential. The credential got you a job. The job paid you a salary. The salary let you survive. It was a functional transaction. But the world changed, and the school system did not. The economy no longer needs the same kind of workers it needed in 1950. Automation is doing the repetitive tasks. Artificial intelligence is doing the analytical tasks. What the economy desperately needs, what the market will pay extraordinary amounts of money for, are people who can do things that machines cannot easily replicate. People who can read a room and adjust in real time. People who can build trust across a negotiation table. People who can take a complicated idea and communicate it so clearly that a complete stranger is moved to act. These are the skills that generate wealth in the 21st century economy. These are the skills nobody taught you. Let us begin. The first skill, the art of selling without selling. I want to be precise about what I mean here, because the word selling carries baggage that I need to remove. Most people, when they hear the word selling, picture a used car salesman. smooth talking, manipulative, pushing a product on someone who does not want it. And because of that association, they spend their entire lives actively avoiding anything that looks or feels like sales. They consider it beneath them. They consider it dishonest. They went to college, they have a degree, they should not have to sell anything. This is one of the most expensive misconceptions a person can carry through their life. Everything you want requires persuasion. Every promotion you pursue requires convincing someone above you that you deserve it. Every raise you negotiate requires making a case for your own value. Every business you want to build requires convincing customers to exchange their money for something you created. Every idea you want to see in the world requires convincing other people that the idea is worth their time, their attention, and their resources. If you cannot persuade, you cannot advance. It is that simple. And here is the crucial distinction that separates real selling from manipulation. Real selling is not about pressuring someone into a decision they do not want to make. Real selling is about understanding what someone genuinely needs and clearly demonstrating how what you offer addresses that need. It is a service, it is communication, it is empathy combined with clarity. When I was a young man, I was terrified of public speaking. Genuinely terrified, not nervous, terrified. If I had to stand up in front of a group of people and articulate an idea, I became physically ill. I understood numbers, I understood businesses, but I could not translate what I understood into language that moved other people. And I recognized very early that this was a fatal limitation, because all the insight in the world is worth nothing if you cannot communicate it to the person who has the capital to act on it. So I took a Dale Carnegie course. It cost me $100, the most important $100 I ever spent. Not because it made me into some kind of charismatic stage performer, but because it taught me the fundamental mechanics of how human persuasion actually works. It taught me that people do not make decisions based on logic. They make decisions based on emotion, and then justify those decisions with logic afterward. It taught me that the most powerful sentence in any negotiation is not "I believe" or "I think." It is "you told me." When you feed someone back their own words, their own stated needs, their own expressed fears, they do not experience it as persuasion. They experience it as recognition. They feel understood. And the moment someone feels genuinely understood, their resistance to agreeing with you drops to nearly zero. This is the art of selling without selling. It is not manipulation. It is listening so deeply and reflecting so accurately that the person across the table convinces themselves. The return on this skill is incalculable. It does not matter what industry you are in. It does not matter what your title is. It does not matter whether you are an engineer or an artist or an accountant. The person in any room who can most clearly and most compellingly communicate value is the person who earns the most, advances the fastest, and builds the most wealth. Every single time. A degree tells someone what you know. This skill determines whether they act on it. The second skill, reading financial statements like a native language. There is a language being spoken all around you every single day in boardrooms and investment offices and corporate headquarters. And the vast majority of people who work inside those organizations cannot read a word of it. That language is the financial statement. I am going to tell you something that will sound outrageous until you think about it carefully. The average university graduate with a business degree cannot look at a balance sheet and tell you within 60 seconds whether the business behind it is healthy or dying. They were taught the theory of accounting. They were not taught how to read the story that the numbers are telling, and that is an entirely different skill. A financial statement is not a set of numbers. It is a biography of a business. Every line tells you something about how the business was run, what decisions the management made, what risks they took, and whether those risks are paying off or quietly destroying the enterprise from the inside. If you know how to read it, you can see all of this. If you do not, the numbers are just numbers. Let me explain what I actually look for when I read a financial statement, because this is not about memorizing accounting formulas. It is about understanding three fundamental questions. The first question is, does this business generate more cash than it consumes? This sounds obvious, but the way companies report earnings is designed either deliberately or accidentally to obscure this basic reality. A company can report positive earnings while actually burning through cash at a terrifying rate. And a company can report modest earnings while quietly generating extraordinary free cash flow. The difference between these two situations is the difference between a growing asset and a slowly imploding liability. You can only see it if you know where to look. The second question is, does this business have the power to raise prices without losing customers? This is what I call the pricing moat. If a business can raise its prices by 10% and its customers grumble but stay, that business has an economic moat around it. It has something that competitors cannot easily replicate and customers cannot easily live without. If a business raises prices by 5% and half its customers leave, that business is in a permanent war for survival. The financial statements will tell you which category a business falls into if you know how to read them. The third question is the management allocating capital intelligently? Because at the end of the day, the most important job a business leader has is not managing people or creating strategy. It is deciding where to put the money. Every dollar that comes into the business is a vote. The management can invest it in growth. They can return it to shareholders. They can build cash reserves. They can waste it on empire-building acquisitions that make the CEO look powerful but destroy shareholder value. The financial statements reveal exactly what choices they are making, and the pattern of those choices across 3 to 5 years of statements tells you almost everything you need to know about whether this management team deserves your trust and your money. You do not need an accounting degree to learn this language. You need approximately 6 months of deliberate study, reading actual financial statements for businesses you already understand as a consumer, combined with a few foundational books on the subject. After 6 months, you will have a capability that the vast majority of college graduates do not possess. After 6 years, you will have a capability that most professional fund managers would envy. And the return on this skill is not just financial. It changes how you see the world. You stop looking at businesses as products and services. You start looking at them as economic engines. You understand why certain companies survive recessions and others collapse. You understand why certain industries create millionaires and others trap their participants in permanent wage stagnation. You see the world through a different lens, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The third skill, writing with precision and power. Charlie Munger has said many times that clear writing is the external evidence of clear thinking. I agree with him completely, but I want to go further. Clear writing is not just evidence of clear thinking. In the modern economy, clear writing is a wealth-generating machine that almost nobody recognizes as such. Think about what writing actually does in a business context. Every email you send is a negotiation. Every proposal you write is a sales document. Every report you produce is an argument for a specific conclusion. Every memo you circulate is a bid for someone's attention and agreement. If you write poorly, if your sentences are vague, your logic is tangled, and your meaning must be excavated from beneath layers of jargon and hedging, you will lose those negotiations. You will fail to close those proposals. You will produce reports that people skim and forget. You will write memos that nobody acts on. If you write with precision and power, the opposite happens. I have built most of my business relationships through writing. The annual letter to Berkshire Hathaway shareholders is not just a reporting document. It is a philosophical statement. It is a demonstration of how I think. It is, in the most literal sense, a marketing document that attracts the kind of long-term investors I want and repels the kind of short-term speculators I do not want. That letter, written once a year, does more to position Berkshire Hathaway in the minds of the business world than any advertising campaign ever could. And this principle scales downward to every level of professional life. The person in any organization who can take a complicated situation and reduce it to a clear, precise, compelling one-page memo is the person who gets promoted, not because they work the hardest, not because they have the most credentials, but because they made the decision-maker's job easier. They removed friction from the process of understanding and acting. That is an extremely valuable service, and it is a service that machines currently cannot provide at the level of nuance that really matters. The mechanics of powerful writing are not mysterious. They are learnable by anyone with a reasonable education and the willingness to practice deliberately. Short sentences, concrete nouns, active verbs, specific numbers instead of vague approximations. Logic that moves forward without doubling back on itself. A clear conclusion stated at the beginning, not buried at the end. These are not stylistic preferences. They are the technical requirements for writing that actually works. Read the best business writers. Read the annual letters of the companies you admire. Read clear thinkers across disciplines, and then write every day, even if nobody reads it, even if it is just a journal of your own thinking. The act of translating thought into precise language is an exercise that, repeated thousands of times, produces an extraordinary compounding effect on the quality of your mind. The fourth skill, understanding human psychology and decision architecture. Here is a question that nobody asks in business school. If human beings were rational, why would advertising exist? Think about that for a moment. If people made their purchasing decisions based purely on logic and value, the only relevant information would be the price and the specifications of the product. There would be no need for brand building. There would be no need for emotional narratives and commercials. There would be no need for the science of retail layout that determines where products sit on shelves to maximize impulse purchases. All of that would be completely irrelevant if people were the rational economic actors that introductory economics textbooks describe. But people are not rational. They are emotional, tribal, status-driven, loss-averse, present-biased, and extraordinarily susceptible to social proof. And the wealthiest people and institutions in the world have learned to work with human psychology rather than against it. I am not talking about manipulation. I want to be absolutely clear about that distinction. I am talking about understanding. When you deeply understand how human beings actually make decisions as opposed to how we theoretically should make decisions, you gain an extraordinary advantage in every domain of life. You understand why your negotiation counterpart is taking the position they are taking, and you understand what emotional need is underneath that position. You understand why your customers hesitate at the point of purchase, and you understand what specific concern is blocking them. You understand why your team resists a new initiative, and you understand what fear about their own status and security is driving that resistance. Not manipulative tricks, solutions. You can restructure a negotiation so that the other party gets the emotional win they need while you get the economic outcome you need. You can address the specific unspoken concern that is preventing your customer from buying. You can communicate a new initiative in language that addresses the fear before it has a chance to harden into resistance. Daniel Kahneman, the psychologist who won the Nobel Prize in economics, described two systems of human thinking. System one is fast, automatic, emotional, and operates almost entirely below conscious awareness. System two is slow, deliberate, logical, and requires significant mental effort to engage. The crucial insight from decades of research is that System one makes the vast majority of actual decisions and then sends them to System two to be rationalized after the fact. This single insight is worth more in practical application than anything I learned in any formal economics class. Because it means that if you want to influence a decision, you must engage System one. You must connect at the emotional level before you ever make a logical argument. The logical argument is important, but it comes second, always. The person who understands this in your industry is the person who closes deals that equally qualified competitors cannot close, who builds teams that produce results that management cannot explain, who negotiates outcomes that look to outside observers like they should not have been possible. And this knowledge is almost entirely absent from formal education. The fifth skill, building and managing systems. I want to tell you about the most dangerous illusion in business. The illusion is this: if you are the best at something, you will be rewarded in proportion to your skill. This sounds reasonable, it sounds fair, but it is wrong. And understanding why it is wrong is the key to unlocking income that is not limited by how many hours you can work. Here is the reality. There is a fundamental difference between being good at a task and being good at building a system that performs a task. A great surgeon who operates with extraordinary skill can perform 3 surgeries a day. A mediocre administrator who builds an extraordinary hospital system can enable 300 surgeries a day across dozens of surgeons of varying quality, who generates more wealth. Not the great surgeon, the mediocre administrator. This is the economics of systems. When I bought Berkshire Hathaway Textile Mill in 1965, I was not buying it to become a better textile manufacturer. I was looking at it as the beginning of a system, a capital allocation system, a vehicle that could acquire other businesses and deploy capital to generate returns that would compound over time. The underlying mechanism mattered less than the architecture of how capital would flow through the organization. I was thinking about the system, not the task. McDonald's is the most powerful illustration of this principle I know. The food at McDonald's is not exceptional. Nobody in the world would identify a McDonald's hamburger as the best hamburger they have ever eaten. But the system that produces and delivers that hamburger is one of the most sophisticated operational systems in human history. It can be replicated by a 17-year-old employee who started working there 3 days ago. In any country, in any city, at any scale, the founder, Ray Kroc, did not get rich by becoming a better short-order cook. He got rich by designing a system so robust and so replicable that extraordinary talent was not required to operate it. If your income depends entirely on your personal effort, you have built a job, not a wealth creation system. And a job, however well-paying in the short term, has a ceiling. Your time is finite. Your energy is finite. The moment you are unable to work, the income stops. A system keeps generating value while you sleep. A system can grow beyond your personal capacity. A system can be sold because it has value that exists independently of you. A job cannot be sold. A system can. Learning to think in systems is a distinct cognitive skill. It requires you to constantly ask, what is the process that produces this outcome? What would need to be true for this process to work without my direct involvement? What are the failure points in this process? And how do I engineer redundancy into them? How do I measure whether the system is working? How do I improve the system without disrupting its operation? These questions do not appear on any university curriculum I have ever encountered, but the people who learn to ask them and who develop genuine skill at answering them are the architects of industry. They are the people who build the organizations that everyone else wants to work for. The sixth skill, capital allocation. This is the skill that I have spent my entire life practicing, and it is the one that most directly and most dramatically separates the wealthy from the permanently working class. Capital allocation is the art and science of deciding where to deploy resources, whether that means money, time, attention, or energy, in order to generate the maximum long-term return. It sounds technical, it is not. At its core, it is the answer to a single question of all the ways I could use what I have right now, which use will produce the most compounding value over time. Every single person on earth is making capital allocation decisions every day, but most people are making them badly because they have never been taught to think about them deliberately. When you spend money on a liability that depreciates the moment you acquire it, you are making a capital allocation decision. When you spend your Sunday watching television instead of building a skill that will increase your earning power, you are making a capital allocation decision. When you leave money in a savings account earning 1% per year because the alternative feels too complicated, you are making a capital allocation decision. And all three of those decisions, compounded over years and decades, produce dramatically different outcomes. The wealthy think about capital allocation constantly, not as an abstract financial concept, but as a practical discipline applied to every meaningful decision in their lives. They ask, is this deployment of my resources moving me toward a position of greater capability, greater productivity, or greater freedom? Or is it simply consuming my resources in exchange for a temporary comfort? Let me give you the concrete framework that I use. Every dollar you have is a seed. You can eat the seed today. It will satisfy your hunger for a short time, and then the seed is gone. Or you can plant the seed. It will produce nothing for a while, sometimes for a very long while, and then it will produce more seeds than you planted. And each of those seeds, if planted again, will produce more seeds still. This is the compound logic of capital allocation applied to every resource you possess. The question is never, what do I want right now? The question is always, what do I want my life to look like in 10 years, and what deployment of my current resources best moves me toward that life? Most people cannot answer the second question because they have never clearly articulated what they actually want their life to look like in 10 years. They have vague aspirations, more money, more freedom, less stress, but not specific visions. And without a specific vision, every capital allocation decision is made in a vacuum. You end up optimizing for immediate comfort, which is the most expensive optimization strategy available. This skill is not taught in school because it is fundamentally a skill of self-governance and long-term thinking, and institutions that depend on your consumption have a strong economic interest in keeping you oriented toward the present. The seventh skill, building and maintaining valuable relationships. I have saved this for last because it is the one that people most consistently undervalue and most consistently misunderstand. Most people, when they think about networking, think about it as a transactional activity. You collect business cards, you attend industry events, you connect with people on professional platforms, and you periodically reach out to the people you have collected when you need something from them. This is not relationship building. This is a form of social scorekeeping, and it produces shallow connections that provide almost no value when you actually need support. Real relationships, the kind that generate extraordinary value over time, are built on an entirely different foundation. They are built on genuine curiosity about other people, on the willingness to give value before asking for value, on consistency over long periods of time, and on the rarest and most powerful ingredient of all, trustworthiness. Let me tell you something I have observed across decades of business dealings. The most valuable resource in any transaction is not money. It is trust. Trust reduces friction. Trust accelerates decisions. Trust allows two parties to reach an agreement in an hour that would otherwise require months of legal negotiation. When Charlie Munger and I acquire a business, we often do it with a handshake, not because we are naive, but because we have spent decades building a reputation such that the people we want to do business with already know that our word is binding. That reputation is worth more economically than any asset on our balance sheet. It is the reason that extraordinary deals come to us rather than us having to search for them. And this reputation is not built through strategy, it is built through behavior. Consistent, unglamorous, unexciting behavior, repeated thousands of times, doing what you say you will do when you say you will do it, acknowledging when you are wrong instead of defending a position to protect your ego, giving credit generously and taking blame honestly, treating people at every level of every organization with the same respect you would give to the most powerful person in the room. These behaviors practiced consistently over years create a social capital that is genuinely more valuable than financial capital, because social capital is the mechanism through which financial opportunities flow. The best deals I have ever made came to me through the trust of people who knew my reputation, not through the performance of any financial analysis, however good that analysis was. There is a practical dimension to this that I want to be specific about. Valuable relationships are built by being genuinely useful to people before you need anything from them. The question you should be asking when you enter any new relationship is not, how can this person help me? The question is, what do I know or what do I have access to that could genuinely improve this person's situation? If you approach relationships as a place to give value before you extract value, the compounding effect over time is extraordinary. People remember with surprising accuracy the individuals who helped them when they did not have to. And when those people are in a position to return that help, which life inevitably arranges, they do so with a generosity proportional to the genuine value they received. This is not altruism, though there is nothing wrong with altruism. This is the long-term economics of human social systems. Give first, give generously, give consistently, and the returns will exceed what any financial investment could provide. Not in the short term, perhaps, but over a lifetime, always. Now let us step back from the 7 skills and look at the full picture. Because I want to make an argument that goes deeper than the practical. I want to make a philosophical argument about what education is actually for. The dominant assumption in our culture is that education is a credential machine. You accumulate credentials. The credentials signal your value to employers. Employers reward those credentials with salary. And the higher your credential, the higher your salary. This model has a logic to it, but it has a fundamental flaw, which is that it positions you as a supplier of labor to a system owned by someone else. Your entire economic life is predicated on someone else choosing to buy what you are selling. The moment no one wants to buy it, whether because of automation or economic contraction or simple obsolescence, you have nothing. The 7 skills I have described today are different in their fundamental economic structure. They are not credentials, they are capabilities. And capabilities, unlike credentials, do not require anyone's permission to deploy. You do not need an employer to give you permission to persuade, to write clearly, to understand human psychology, to build systems, to allocate capital, or to cultivate trust. You can exercise these capabilities independently. You can combine them. You can apply them to problems that no employer has yet to find and therefore compensate you for. This is the economic freedom that the credential system never provides and was never designed to provide. I have a simple question that I use to evaluate any educational investment, whether it is a degree, a course, a book, or a mentor relationship. The question is, will this make me more capable, or will it only make me more credentialed? Capable means I can generate value even in the absence of a formal institution telling me what to do. Credentialed means I can prove to an institution that I followed their process correctly. Both have value, but they are not the same. And in the economy of the 21st century, capability is dramatically more valuable than credentialing, and growing more valuable every year as credentialing becomes easier to acquire, and therefore less scarce, and therefore less valuable. The people who will build extraordinary wealth in the coming decades are not the people who accumulated the most impressive credentials. They are the people who develop the deepest capabilities, the people who can sell without appearing to sell, the people who can read the financial story of a business at a glance, the people who write with the clarity and force of someone who thinks without confusion, the people who understand why human beings behave the way they behave and who use that understanding to create value rather than extract it, the people who build systems that generate results beyond their personal effort, the people who allocate resources with a long time horizon and the discipline to hold that horizon under pressure, and the people who have spent years building a network of genuine trust that opens doors that money alone cannot unlock. These people are not more intelligent than the average university graduate. They are not more talented. They are not more privileged. The only thing that separates them is the choice of what to build. They chose to build themselves, deliberately, systematically, without waiting for an institution to hand them a syllabus. That choice is available to every person watching this. Let me give you the practical framework for how to begin. Pick one of the 7 skills, not all of them. One, the one that is most relevant to where you are right now in your professional life, or the one that most directly addresses your greatest limitation. Do not try to develop all 7 simultaneously. That is the addition trap. That is the disease of trying to do everything and therefore accomplishing nothing. Focus is the mechanism through which all progress is made. Once you have chosen your skill, you need 3 things. You need a model. Find the person or people who are at the extraordinary level of that skill and study them directly, not through a textbook that describes their methods in the abstract, through their actual output. Read what the great writers wrote. Listen to how the great persuaders communicate. Study how the great capital allocators actually made their specific decisions. You are looking for the living embodiment of the skill, not the theoretical description of it. You need a practice structure. The difference between knowledge and skill is not intelligence. It is repetition under conditions of real feedback. You cannot develop selling skill by reading about selling. You have to have real conversations with real people who give you real responses. You cannot develop writing skill by studying rhetoric. You have to write and get your writing in front of readers who tell you honestly whether it worked. You cannot develop capital allocation skill by studying theory. You have to actually make allocation decisions with real resources, even small ones, and track the outcomes over time. And you need patience, because every one of the skills I have described today produces almost no visible result in the first year. The compound nature of capability development means that the curve is flat at the beginning and explosive later. Most people quit during the flat part. They do not see results proportional to their effort, and they conclude that the effort is misdirected. But the flat part is where the foundation is being laid. It is the period during which the roots are growing underground and visible, building the infrastructure that will eventually support extraordinary growth. The people who become exceptional at these skills are not exceptional in their intelligence. They are exceptional in their willingness to continue through the flat part, to continue when there is no immediate evidence that the effort is working, to trust the mathematics of compounding even when the early returns are disappointing. This is the most important thing I can tell you. The game of wealth is not won by the smartest player. It is not won by the best educated player. It is not won by the hardest working player. It is won by the most consistent player. The player who showed up every day during the flat part, who kept building the skills that did not yet show results, who trusted the process when the process appeared to be failing. 99% of my net worth was accumulated after the age of 50. That is not a coincidence. That is what the compounding of capability looks like across a lifetime. The skills I built in my 20s and 30s and 40s were not producing spectacular results in the short term, but they were compounding silently, invisibly, building toward an outcome that when it finally arrived with full force, looked to outside observers like something that had happened quickly. It had not happened quickly. It had happened across decades of consistent, deliberate, patient development. You may be 20 years old watching this, or 40, or 60. It does not matter. The mathematics of compounding does not care about your starting age. It cares only about the length of time you allow it to work. and the consistency with which you feed it. The best time to begin developing these skills was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. Do not spend the next 4 years accumulating a credential that tells the world you followed someone else's curriculum. Spend the next 4 years building the capabilities that will allow you to write your own. The door is open. It has always been open. That's all. Thanks for watching.